The sun was dipping low over the manicured lawns of Oak Ridge Estates, a neighborhood where appearances mattered more than substance. It was the kind of place where hedges were trimmed to exact measurements. Garage doors gleamed like showroom floors, and gossip traveled faster than the speed of sound. For Marcus and his wife Alana, it was supposed to be a fresh start as safe, this quiet community where they could raise their newborn son. They had moved in just months before Alana gave birth. Their modest home nestled between sprawling brick houses with white shutters and flower beds that looked like something out of a catalog. On this particular afternoon, Marcus carried the diaper bag over one shoulder while Alana cradled their baby, wrapped in a soft blue blanket against her chest. Every step toward their driveway carried the heavy sweetness of exhaustion and joy that came with bringing a new life into the world. But peace rarely lasted long in Oak Ridge Estates. There was always one neighbor who believed she was the law. And in this community, that role was filled by Karen. She wasn't the official president of the HOA, but she might as well have been. Her presence loomed at every board meeting, every pool gathering, and every neighborhood watch sign-up sheet. She wore oversized sunglasses as though she were constantly shielding herself from some imagined glare. And her favorite accessory was the clipboard she carried, filled with notes about who left their trash cans out too long or whose lawn looked unkempt. The neighbors tolerated her because it was easier than confronting her. But Marcus had noticed the way blinds twitched whenever Karen appeared, like a collective shudder. That evening, Karen had been pacing her driveway, arms folded. Scanning the street like a hawk circling a field, she noticed Marcus and Alana before they noticed her, her eyes narrowing when she saw the bundle in Alana's arms. She froze for a moment, then stormed across the street with quick, determined strides. Her sandals slapped the pavement like warning shots. By the time she reached them, Marcus's new trouble was brewing. Karen's lips curled into a tight, disapproving sneer. "Excuse me," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to slice through the quiet hum of cicadas. "What do you think you're doing parading that baby through this neighborhood?" Alana blinked, taken aback. "Parading?" she repeated, her arms instinctively tightening around her newborn. "This is our son. We're just bringing him home." Karen tilted her chin upward, her tone dripping with disdain. "That baby doesn't belong here. I've already spoken with the board about families who don't meet the standards of our community, and I can tell you right now this isn't going to fly." She jabbed a finger toward the infant. Her nails painted a harsh red that gleamed in the fading sunlight. "You need to hand him over until we can sort this out. I'll call Child Protective Services if I have to." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Alana's mouth fell open. She held her son even tighter, the protective instinct of a mother flooding her veins. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice trembling with disbelief. "You want me to give you my baby?" Karen nodded briskly, as though her demand were perfectly reasonable. "It's for his own good. We have standards here, rules. If you don't comply, I'll involve the HOA and the authorities." "You think you can just move in here, dragging down property values, ignoring how we do things?" "Not on my watch." Marcus had been silent up to this point, his jaw tightening with every word Karen spewed. He was used to discipline, used to waiting for the right moment before making a move. But hearing this woman, this stranger, demand his wife's hand over their newborn was something else entirely. He stepped forward, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the pavement. His voice was calm, steady, but laced with authority that made the air itself seem heavier. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "you're out of line." Karen scoffed, mistaking his composure for weakness. She shifted her weight, putting her hands on her hips. "Out of line? I'm protecting this neighborhood. People like you don't understand how this works. If you want to live here, you follow the rules. And if you can't, you leave. Simple as that. Now, give me the baby before I escalate this." Alana shook her head, her voice breaking. "You can't be serious. He's just a newborn. He hasn't even been home a full day." "You have no right," but Karen cut her off, raising her voice so the words carried down the street. Neighbors began peeking out from behind curtains, some stepping onto porches to see the commotion. "Everyone here deserves to feel safe," she shouted, gesturing wildly toward the baby. And if you people won't respect that, then I will make sure something is done about it. The implication in her words was clear. It burned Marcus from the inside out. You people. He had heard those words before, often enough to recognize the venom they carried. Karen's prejudice wasn't about the babies crying, or the supposed rules of the HOA. It was about the fact that Marcus was a black man, his wife was a black woman, and their newborn represented something Karen couldn't stand to see in her carefully. A controlled world. Marcus took another step closer. His eyes locked on Karen's. He didn't raise his voice, but the sheer intensity in his tone silenced the gathering crowd. Listen carefully, he said, his words deliberate and precise. You will not speak to my wife that way. You will not point your finger at my son. And you will not, under any circumstances, demand that we hand him over. Do I make myself clear? Karen opened her mouth to retort, but something in Marcus's gaze stopped her cold. She wasn't staring at an ordinary neighbor. She was staring at a man who had seen war zones, who had trained his mind and body to withstand the unthinkable. Marcus had learned to stay calm under fire, to steady his breath when chaos erupted, to see through threats and intimidation like smoke in the wind. His training as a Navy SEAL had taught him that strength wasn't about shouting or blustered, it was about control. And right now, he was in complete control. Still, Karen bristled, unwilling to back down in front of an audience. Don't think you can intimidate me, she snapped, though her voice quivered slightly now. I'll call the HOA president. I'll call the police. You'll regret moving here. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than her threats, his presence more commanding than her words. Alana, standing behind him, felt a wave of relief. For all her own anger and fear, she knew Marcus wasn't just her husband, he was her shield. Unyielding and immovable. The neighbors who had gathered shifted uncomfortably. They had seen Karen's tantrums before, but this was different. This wasn't a dispute over lawn height or mailbox paint colors. This was a woman demanding a mother surrender her child, and a father standing like a fortress in her way. Whispers rippled through the crowd, but no one spoke loudly enough to interrupt. All eyes were on Marcus and Karen. For the first time, Karen seemed uncertain. She took a step back, her jaw tightening as she realized she was losing control of the situation. Her threats, her tone, her usual tactics, none of it was working. Marcus hadn't raised his voice, hadn't made a single move toward aggression. Yet she felt utterly overpowered. The standoff hung in the air, tense and electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. And though Marcus hadn't yet revealed his background, the truth was already written in the way he carried himself the way he stood his ground without hesitation, in the way his eyes never wavered. Karen was up against more than she had bargained for, and deep down, she knew it. The silence after Marcus's words was thick, stretching out across the cul-de-sac until even the cicadas seemed too quiet. Karen's face flushed crimson, caught between outrage and a flicker of fear she was desperate to hide. Her sunglasses had slid down her nose during her rant, revealing eyes that darted from Marcus's calm, unflinching gaze to the growing circle of neighbors watching from their porches. For once, Karen wasn't in control of the narrative. She had stormed across the street expecting to command the situation, to shame Marcus and Alana into submission. But the script she'd relied on for years had crumbled in her hands. Marcus didn't move closer. He didn't have to. His stance alone radiated authority, the kind that couldn't be faked. Shoulders squared, feet planted firm. Arms loose but ready, a posture that spoke of countless hours drilled into muscle memory. To the neighbors, he simply looked like a man protecting his family. To anyone with a sharper eye, though, the precision in his movements hinted at something far more dangerous. Karen had no idea she was tote-to with a Navy SEAL, a man who had spent years facing enemies far more formidable than an HOA tyrant with a clipboard. "Step back," Marcus repeated, his voice low but carrying. Now Karen swallowed hard. Her mouth opened, ready to unleash another tirade. But the weight of his words pressed down like a command she couldn't quite ignore. She faltered, her foot shuffling half a step back before she caught herself. The retreat was subtle, but everyone watching noticed. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a sound Karen wasn't used to hearing, disapproval directed at her. Alana, holding their newborn close, found her own strength returning as she saw her husband stand so resolute. The fear that had twisted in her chest when Karen demanded her baby was slowly replaced with pride. She knew Marcus. She knew the battles he had fought, both overseas and within himself, and she knew that when he said enough, he meant it with a finality that could not be challenged. Karen tried to recover her footing. "This is harassment," she snapped, her voice quivering despite her effort to sound commanding. "I'm only doing my duty for the neighborhood. Everyone here deserves to feel safe from situations like this." Her attempt to rally the neighbors fell flat. Heads turned away. A few muttered under their breath. Safe from what? From a young couple bringing their newborn home? From a father who dared to stand tall? Marcus let the question hang unspoken, his silence cutting deeper than any accusation. Finally, he leaned forward slightly, his words slow and deliberate. "You will not threaten my wife. You will not threaten my child. If you ever step onto my property with nonsense like this again, it will be the last time. Do you understand me?" Something in his tone, steady, almost conversational, made the hairs on the back of Karen's neck stand up. He wasn't yelling, wasn't blustering, but the finality in his voice carried more weight than any shouting match ever could. It was the voice of a man who had given orders in combat, who had seen those orders followed without question. Even without knowing his past, Karen could sense the discipline, the certainty, the authority of someone who would not be crossed. For once, Karen had no ready comeback. She sputtered, fumbling for words. You think you can intimidate me? I'll call the HOA president. I'll call the sheriff. I'll have you out of here in a week." But even as she said it, her voice lacked conviction. The neighbors could see it. More importantly, she could see it. One of the bystanders, an older gentleman who had lived in the neighborhood long before Karen ever arrived, cleared his throat from his porch. "Karen," he called out, "enough. Leave them be." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weary authority of someone tired of watching her antics. A few others nodded in agreement. Karen's head snapped around, stunned. The crowd that usually enabled her with silence was turning against her. Marcus didn't press further. He didn't need to. He simply stood there, calm and immovable, until Karen finally took a full step back. Her arms crossed, her sunglasses shoved hastily back up her nose as she muttered excuses under her breath. "Just looking out for the neighborhood," she grumbled, retreating toward her driveway. "People don't appreciate what I do." Her voice trailed off, thinner and less certain with each step. When she was finally gone, the tension in the air dissolved like a thunderstorm breaking apart. Neighbors drifted back inside, some shaking their heads, others offering small nods of respect toward Marcus and Alana. The young couple remained where they stood, the baby still asleep against Alana's chest. Untouched by the chaos, Alana let out a shaky breath. "I thought," she began, but Marcus interrupted gently. Placing a hand on her shoulder, "She'll never touch him," he said simply. His eyes softened as he looked at her, then at their son. "Not while I'm here." Alana felt her throat tighten, tears brimming. She had always admired Marcus's strength, but seeing him channel it not in aggression but in unwavering. The comment reminded her why she had fallen in love with him in the first place. He wasn't just a warrior. He was a protector, not just of his country, but of his family. Over the next few days, word of the confrontation spread quietly through Oak Ridge Estates. The whispers that had once fueled Karen's reign now worked against her. Neighbors began to speak up in ways they hadn't before. Someone else called out her behavior at the next HOA meeting, citing how she had crossed the line. A petition began circulating to limit her authority on the board. For the first time in years, her grip on the community loosened. Karen, meanwhile, avoided Marcus and Alana. She walked her dog on different streets, crossed the road if she saw them coming, and never again mentioned the baby. Whether it was fear of Marcus's steady gaze, or the humiliation of losing face in front of the neighbors, no one could say. But the result was the same. The harassment stopped. Marcus never boasted about what had happened. He didn't tell anyone about his years as a SEAL, the deployments, the battles he'd survived. He didn't need to. The truth was written in how he carried himself, in the quiet dignity of a man who had nothing to prove. To those who had witnessed the confrontation, it was enough to know that Karen had finally been silenced by something stronger than her clipboard and her threats. One evening, as Marcus rocked his newborn son on the porch while Alana rested inside, he thought about how fragile peace could be. In combat, he had learned that peace wasn't something given, it was something earned, something protected fiercely against those who would disrupt it. That lesson was no less true here, in a suburban neighborhood, than it had been overseas. He looked down at his son, whose tiny fist had curled around his finger, and felt a surge of determination. He would raise this child to know strength, but also respect. To understand that power didn't come from intimidation or noise, but from self-control and conviction. Karen had tried to strip away their dignity, but in doing so, she had only reinforced the bond between father, mother, and child. The night air was cool, stars pricking the darkening sky. Marcus leaned back in his chair, the baby's gentle breath steady against his chest. Inside, Alana's soft laughter drifted through the open window as she watched from the living room. In that quiet moment, the chaos of the confrontation felt distant, irrelevant. All that mattered was here, in his arms and under his roof. Karen had wanted to make them outsiders. Instead, she had made them stronger. And as Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of his son's heartbeat, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: his family was safe. And no one, not even the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, would ever change that.